My name is Tedra Noonan, and um, let's just start with chapter one out of the Big Blue Book, the any book that every addict should have. Whether or not you are a avid NA meeting attender or not, I've been both in my life. I will address my own personal opinions on that in a little bit, but just starting off, one thing I do think is pretty generally agreed upon, no matter what you believe about addiction, is that if you are an addict yourself, you need to 100% fully embrace the fact that you have a problem, whether that is with substances, alcohol, gambling, you name it, anything that you have no control over and that is ruining your life is a problem. Until you address the fact that it is a problem, probably is not going to be better anytime soon. Personally, I didn't find out that I had a problem until I was in my 20s. And I just so happened to be part of the generation that was severely affected by the opiate epidemic. But I mean, that's how life goes, right? You never really know what's going to happen. Like the generation before me was affected by the crack epidemic. There's always going to be something there for people to try to use as an escape. And if you are a person who has addictive tendencies to begin with, and then again, a personal opinion of mine, I think genetics do play a factor in it. If you have that gene, combine those two things, and you're usually not destined for success. For me, I was a really good kid, a straight A student for most of my school years. I got into one of the top 3 art schools for college in the country and was granted a scholarship, a quarter, for a portfolio that I made on like a point and shoot camera. I had zero experience. I didn't even think I was going to get into that school, but it was an amazing experience, and I can't say that I regret a minute of it. I did not graduate from that school. I had a couple traumatic things happen to me when I was there, and tried to finish but couldn't. So I came home a few years into it without a degree and with some post-traumatic stress, which at the time I didn't think was post-traumatic stress. I thought you could just bury that and it would go away, but it does not. And when I came back home, I hadn't seen a lot of my friends since high school, and I had never been a partier. I had never cared to drink or do drugs when I was in high school, so kind of figured it would still be the same. But it was 2010 when I came home, and the area that I'm from, that was like right when the pills, the specifically Percocet pills, hit really hard. There's a bridge that separates where I live from like what seems like the rest of the world. And, you know, the cities across the bridge had been dealing with this problem for years, but we hadn't been hit yet. And we're naive to what it was. nobody really even knew what they were doing. And because people were getting them from doctors with legitimate prescriptions for maybe things that they had already dealt with before. Like when I got my wisdom teeth out when I was 18, I went home with a prescription of Percocet. I mean, granted, they were 5 milligrams, not 30 milligrams, but same drug. After I gave birth to my daughter, the nurses handed me Oxycontin. Um, because I didn't have an epidural, and it was almost like a reward. You know, you just went through all these hours of pain. Here, you should have this. You deserve this pain relief. But for somebody like me, it flipped a switch in my brain that may or may not have already been flipped the first time I took an opiate, even at a very, very low dose that was given to me legally by a dentist. And from that point on, when all my friends had the 30 milligram versions and were still treating them as party drugs, or, there was no danger yet associated with it. We hadn't known anyone to die yet from it. It was looked at no different than going to a party and having a beer or smoking a joint. I mean, we really had no clue what we were getting involved with. But that is the insidious part of addiction in itself, is that usually you don't have a clue until it's too late and you're too far in. And once that switch is flipped in your brain, there's no unflipping it. You're never going to go back to before that first time you did whatever your addiction is, do whatever you choose to do, whatever your vice is. You can find a way to live with the aftermath. You can find a way to live a normal life, for sure, but you'll never be the same. And that's the saddest part, I think, of this whole thing, is that we're so stigmatized as a group, as in anyone with a drug or alcohol addiction, or even things like gambling or eating. I mean, you're looked down on. Society looks down on you as like you have something wrong with you morally. You are a bad person. You are choosing this over X, Y, and Z. Why can't you just be normal? Why can't you just do what everybody else does? Why can't you just have one beer and not 20 beers? Why can't you just take one pill and not 20 pills? Why can't you just stop? And that's probably some of the worst things you can say to somebody struggling in active addiction, because it just makes them feel more isolated and more misunderstood. And that is why I originally started going to Narcotics Anonymous meetings, because I didn't feel like I had a support group around me that understood what I was really going through. My child's father still doesn't understand. And I consider him a very lucky and blessed individual to not ever have to understand, because I wouldn't wish half of what I've been through on anybody. Had I known what was going to come down the path, I would do anything to take it back, but I can't. So I've had to just keep pushing, keep trying, keep moving, keep going. And not easy all the time, especially when you have a lot of people pointing fingers and essentially kicking you when you're down, and using it to their advantage to get what they want without even thinking about the repercussions on you or your life. And Narcotics Anonymous was the place that I first felt I could really open up and talk about things that I had been through that I didn't even know other people had been through. Never mind hundreds, thousands. I mean, that isolation that addiction puts you in is crippling. If you don't have someone like that to talk to, even just one person in your life that really does understand, that's what's going to kill you, is feeling so alone. And NA can be absolutely 100% an amazing, amazing place and tool for an addict to use for that. There's been plenty of nights that I've gone to meetings and felt a complete 180 from when I felt walking in. Walking in, I was at my wit's end, a step away from a relapse maybe, but walking out, I felt a sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of more than just friends, family. And I made some of the best friends that I think I'll ever make in my life there. But that's kind of the flip side of the coin of that program. As much good as it does, it's still a room full of flawed people with other flawed people running it. I mean, you are bound to run into conflicts, drama. It's like a little mini high school with a lot more drugs and a lot more mental illness. And sometimes those things don't mix well. So I had to take a step back myself for a little bit from going to meetings because, especially in a small area like mine, it got a little too cliquey. If you weren't friends with the right people, you weren't treated the same, you weren't given the same attention or time from the majority as others. Not from everybody. There definitely were some standout people who helped everyone, no matter if they knew you or not, no matter what you looked like, no matter how old you were. You were just, another person who needed help. And that's why I've always tried to do what I can to give back, because those are the people that I remember the most, no matter where I was. Are the people that came up to me first and said hi and introduced themselves because they hadn't seen me before or they hadn't seen me in a while. Because to be brutally honest, I've lost count of how many times I've tried to go back to rehab after relapsing. But I'd be embarrassed to go back to a meeting and know that everyone knew that I relapsed, and now, it shouldn't have to be like that. That's what keeps you in that cycle. That's what keeps you sick. There's no shame in trying to better yourself again and again and again. There's a whole point in that saying of, doesn't matter if you fall down 1,000 times as long as you get up 1,001. So no matter how many times I fell down, I realize now I should never have been ashamed to come back, because I wanted it. I wanted to live a normal life. I wanted all the things that I had before. And it's that stigma, it's that just social bullshit that I really hate. And I've fought now for years, and I plan on continuing to fight because I have a list now, and it started in late 2014. Right now, it's 2021, of people who have passed away. And I'm not talking just acquaintances, not just people I went to school with. I'm talking about people that I was either best friends with, really, really good friends with, have amazing memories with. I mean, I'm never going to meet a list of people like that again. And it's in the 50s, like 50. How many of you can say that you've met 50 amazing people that would stop whatever they were doing if you called them and said, I needed help? I mean, most people don't meet 10 people like that in their lifetime. And I had the luck to meet that many, but unfortunately, that's what this disease does. If you don't give back after you get it, if you manage to be one of the few that get clean and stay clean, you have to give back what you were given. Otherwise, you end up like them. And, most of them had kids. Most of them had families. All of them had parents that loved them. And it ripped apart a lot of communities in this area, to the point where I had a special dress that I would wear to wakes because I was going to so many funerals a month. Every time I turned around, another one of my friends was dead. I found one of my friends dead. It's an ugly, ugly disease, and people don't see that side of it until they're in it. It's really easy to judge from the outside. But until you are living in a house that's infested with bed bugs, with people smoking crack, I was a street away when an 18-year-old kid got shot in the head, and the kid who shot him was living at the house that I was staying at. Came back 5 minutes after he did it, and he was 18 too, and now he's in jail for life. I mean, there's so much pain and devastation across the board that once you start learning more about it, once you start listening to people who have lived it, it's not hard to understand why it's so difficult for some people to stay clean when you're stuck in an environment like that. I mean, you give up because all you see is death and destruction and loss around you. And you start believing all the things that people are saying, that you're a bad person, that you're choosing this, that you're not worthy, that you're useless. How many times I've read online comments about addicts in general, about how we should all just be wiped off the face of the planet, and it would just be doing Earth a service. I find that really hard to believe because, like I said, a lot of the people who aren't here anymore are some of the most kind, compassionate, funny, sweet, give you the shirt off their back, love you no matter what people. They just had a problem. Same problem I have, will always have, should I choose to make a mistake. But I've made a lot of mistakes. I've learned there are certain things that I need to do in order to stay good. There are certain people I need to stay away from. There are situations, places, you name it. I mean, that's what I mean. Your whole entire life has to change when you get clean. And you have to basically relearn how to be human again. You have to relearn how to trust people again. You have to relearn how to be loved yourself again. You have to love yourself and then learn how to let other people love you again. And it takes a long time sometimes. I shouldn't even be here. Statistically, I died. I mean, I had no pulse, no heart rate, no breathing for longer than medically necessary for me to be deemed, gone. But that was the last time that I used my drug of choice. And that was almost 6 years ago now. But it scared the ever-living God out of me because it hadn't happened before. So I think I thought it was never going to happen to me. But that's one of those things that once it happens, you don't get to take back. There's no control there. It's either going to happen or it's not. And for whatever reason, I'm meant to be here because I woke up on a sidewalk. I have 2 friends who were kicked out of cars and did not get the same. They never woke up. So I stopped asking myself why me and not them a long time ago because there's no real rhyme or reason. And I can't let my head get there because that's just not good for my head. But I believe that those friends, others included, would say to me that maybe the reason I'm still here, not only for my family's sake, but is to use my experiences to try to help somebody else who may be struggling. Because you never know. You never know. There's been so many times where I've heard people come in with commitments when I've been in 30-day programs, and all it takes is one sentence from one person that literally just makes something click in my head like, oh my God, that's it. They're right. And somebody could have tried to tell me that same thing 20 times. But you just never know who's going to get through to you. And somebody who can speak passionately about real things, like real tough, hard life experiences that most people are ashamed to talk about or afraid to talk about or feel like since they're past it, they don't ever need to talk about it again. No, I'm sorry. I'm never going to stop talking about it. Because if all those people had stopped talking about it, I probably wouldn't be here today. I know a hell of a lot of other people wouldn't be here today. You just never know who you're going to affect. And you never know who's feeling alone to the point where all they need is to just hear one person say, hey, I've been through it too, and believe that person. That's the difference. I've talked to so many doctors, therapists, counselors, you name it. But I always knew when nobody really knew who or what I was talking about. Clinically, maybe, yeah, because they went to school, they have a PhD, they might be able to give me a diagnosis, they might be able to give me some medication, but it does not make me want to continue a conversation about something personal going on in my life that's continuing this addiction problem, whatever the case may be in the moment. It was the people who I sat across from who could say, I understand because I've been there too. I've been through this too. And you know the difference when you hear someone who's saying that truthfully to you. And that made me want to open up more. And that is what helped me heal over time. Those people are the ones who contributed to helping me save my own life. And that's why I have a love-hate relationship with Narcotics Anonymous. I think it does do well for a lot of people. I think a lot of people need the structure at first. I'm an advocate for the 12 steps. If you haven't done the 12 steps, do the 12 steps. It's not easy. That's why they say don't do it alone. Get a sponsor. Do them with somebody. Go slow at your own pace, because